In these last few chapters of John, Jesus was equipping his disciples for what was to come. Again, I always tell folks, you got to put yourself in their place, because those disciples that were having that Last Supper with Jesus, they didn't have a clue about what was going to happen the next day. That crucifixion thing, even though he tried to tell them, he tried to warn them, they stopped their ears. They didn't want to hear it. So he was trying to prepare them. He showed them an example. The example in John chapter 13, what did Jesus do? He got down on his knees and he washed the disciples' feet. That's what a servant does. The lowest slave in a household would have that job. When somebody would come in, whoever was on the bottom of the totem pole, they would get the job of washing people's feet. Because in those days, when the people would walk through the city, you know, they didn't have like cars and trucks, but they had animals that pulled carts. And you know what animals do? People would walk through that, but they didn't have paved streets. So if somebody came in from the outside, their feet would have been dirty, real dirty. So that was the job of the slave. So what did Jesus do? He got down on his knees and he dressed himself up like a servant and he washed the feet of the disciples. That was his example. He told them, he says, I'm giving you an example. Then he gave him a command. And the command he gave him was, love one another. Oh man, we need to learn that. He said, love one another. That's my command. This is my commandment. We sing that song, this is my commandment, that we love one another, that our joy may be full. Man, I think why so many Christians look so sour all the time is because they don't love anybody. I've said this before, loving somebody doesn't mean you like them necessarily. But loving it has nothing to do with feeling. When we think of love, we think feeling. You know, I love my wife. I have emotions toward her. We're romantic. We have feelings toward each other. This kind of love that Jesus was talking about had nothing to do with how you feel. It has to do with a commitment to be willing to die for one another, to love one another, even as I have loved you, Jesus said. So that was his example, and that was his commandment. Now we're going to read about some of his promises.